mentioned. Michael Sukkar is now the Minister assisting the Treasurer. He's been specifically told by Malcolm Turnbull his job is going to be coming up with some solutions, or at least some attempts to solve these problems of housing affordability or unaffordability. I spoke to him a little earlier, just before the swearing in. Michael Sukkar, thank you for your time. Congratulations on being sworn in today. Let me start by asking, you're going to be looking after, as part of your new job, housing affordability. Yeah. Comes as an international study today, shows Sydney #2 in the world for housing unaffordability, and Melbourne in that top 10 as well. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, these statistics highlight the problem that has appeared to be self-evident to many of us. It's a bad thing. On one hand, of course, we don't want decreasing asset values, but with housing affordability, in effect, my view has been you don't want house prices growing at a faster rate than wages, because to the extent that they increase at a rate faster than wages, of course the housing affordability gap increases.
That's an interesting benchmark, because they've been growing a hell of a lot faster than wages for a long time.
Absolutely, and in a sense this housing affordability issue has crept up on us not just recently but over many decades. So it's a vexed issue. It's not one that I am going to commit today to fixing, because there are no silver bullets, but there are levers that the federal government can pull. There are levers that state governments can pull.
What are the levers the federal government can pull?
Well, in my view, the federal government can assist with the supply of housing. Now, we don't have direct responsibility over it, but I've had a long-held view that we have a role in incentivising states to increase supply, because in effect, I think the problem can boil down to two potential solutions. On one hand, you've got Labor dishonestly proposing a housing tax, effectively, to dampen demand, a rationing system, if you like, for property. I don't think rationing has ever worked, and I certainly don't think a housing tax is going to work.
We can talk about that, but your idea of incentivising housing supply.
Absolutely.
So how would the federal government do that?
Well, I'm not going to announce today. I think
but the options you're talking about.
I have got that many ideas.
Right. So what's one of them? To incentivise supply?
Well, I'm not going to go into any particular policies, because the minute I do, it'll set the hairs running, David.
But you are thinking about...
There are obviously tax levers you can pull, clearly. I mean, that's within the federal government sphere. I don't want to specifically outline what some of those might be. Tax is one. Obviously, the way that we calibrate our payments to states, I mean, the affordable housing spend is many billions of dollars already. I'm not convinced that many billions of dollars has actually led to more affordable housing, and I suspect the figures you've outlined this morning confirm that. So how do we ensure that the existing spend achieves that? How can we ensure that we calibrate tax policy and other federal policies to, in a sense, incentivise and assist state governments?
So taxes can incentivise various aspects of the housing market. Of
course.
Taxing can incentivise the states to supply more housing, or developers to build more housing. But can taxes and tax settings also incentivise investors into the market?
Well, you can, in a sense, the federal government doesn't have any, in my view, tax levers at the moment that disproportionately incentivise anyone to act in a particular way. This is really where...
Even though we've seen investors far outstrip owner-occupiers in the number of loans and dwelling occupations that have taken place over the last 12 months.
Well, as you said in your opening remarks, David, I mean, that's been this is not a new phenomenon. It's not been the last 12 months. I think there are a lot of other factors. You spoke about depressed wages growth, which has really been the case for probably about a decade. I think that is...
hasn't stopped investors buying, though, has it?
No, but that is a much bigger factor. And like I said at the start, David, there are, in a sense, this is like a big... unwieldy machine, and you pull one lever in one place and you might have unintended consequences in another. So we are looking at it to ensure that there aren't those unintended consequences, because we don't want to end up with a housing tax like Labor's, which is going to hurt everyone. It's going to hurt prospective new home buyers. It's going to hurt people who are renting by pushing up rates. It's going to hurt investors. It's going to hurt simple mum and dad.
So you definitely won't touch negative.
No, that is one thing. We fought an election on this, David, and we won the election, and I was hoping that Labor would reflect on that policy, or at least be honest about what the policy is. If Labor would come out and say, look, we want to raise additional taxes, this is a housing tax, we want to use this to plug the budget deficit, I think a lot of people would understand it, but to dishonestly try and brand it as a housing affordability measure.
But you wouldn't do anything, perhaps not Labor's policy, but you wouldn't make any sort of change at all?
David, I'm not going to rule things in or out, and I've been pretty strict on not doing that because, firstly, I haven't been sworn in yet. So I haven't been given the full brief.
Yeah.
But I just want to say to you and your viewers that we are absolutely dedicated to this. When the Prime Minister rang me to offer me this role, he emphasised housing affordability above all others. We are really dedicated. As somebody who's 35, and I look at my friends and family and peer group, we are the people disproportionately affected. So it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time.
There'll be something coming on this this year, presumably.
No doubt. And a multifaceted approach, no silver bullets, but a multifaceted approach that pulls the levers that we can and that assists the state governments pull the levers that they can as well.
Beyond housing, you now join the Treasury portfolio, and I know you haven't had all the briefings and so on just yet, but is there one economic stat that bothers you, that concerns you at the moment when you look at how the economy is going?
Well, look, there are a range of them. Obviously, we would like and we expect GDP to hopefully increase at a faster clip this year.
We'll come back into positive territory for starters.
Of course. I mean, that is our ambition, and I think it would be trite to say that that is not what we're focused on. Of course, we are focused on ensuring that that we can turbocharge growth, because so much of budget repair, so much of creating jobs, in a sense, is a spin-off of policies which ensure that growth is, or we maximise the ability for growth to occur.
Now, much has been said and written about you being an up-and-coming leading Conservative entering the executive of the government. Is that how you see your promotion here as well, in part, that it's having that extra Conservative voice in the ministry?
Well, not exactly. I mean, I read these things as well, David. I mean, we are Liberals. I mean, unlike the Labor Party, we don't have hard factions. I'd be lying to you if I said, of course, we don't have groupings of people that you share certain views with and values with. But I could equally say that there are people that you would, or the media would describe as moderates, who, I've been in some battles with, on the same side as them. So there's a lot of crossover. Of course, I think this is an indication that as a Liberal Party, we must have a strong Conservative and traditional Liberal ministry, reflecting our broader party and reflecting our membership and, of course, reflecting the values of Australians. I don't view it in those hard terms. I mean, the Prime Minister and I have a very good and close working relationship. And
so you wouldn't, for example, be sitting around the table when it comes to it and saying we should get rid of the RET, the renewable energy target?
Well, we would. I mean, there are a range of policies that I would want to have input into, but I've got a big enough job with the assistant.
What's your view on that, though? Should we keep going with this renewable energy target or get rid of it?
I think Josh Frydenberg's doing a brilliant job in this space. I think Josh has emphasised the need for energy security and for us to do what we can to put downward pressure on electricity prices.
But should we keep this renewable energy target?
I think in politics, as you know, David, there is the art of the possible and the impossible. Now, to change the RET, we saw last time through albeit the previous crossbench, to moderate the RET as we did was a pretty difficult task. I think if you look at the current makeup of the Senate, I think the status quo of the RET is the most likely, because you've got to legislate that.
What would be your preference, though?
Well,
forget the Senate. I mean, if you take a position.
David, my preference is very clear. I want the cheapest possible electricity.
That means no RET.
I want governments focused on how we can ensure pensioners, those on fixed incomes, are not, for example, on a day like today in Canberra, 35 odd degrees, you know, they're not shy to put on the air conditioner.
So
that's what I want.
That would mean no rep.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there are ways that we can meet those environmental targets, and I think Minister Frydenberg is walking a fine line, but doing it in an extraordinary.
One thing you can do without the Senate is pull out of the Paris Agreement. Should you do that?
I'm not going to speak about something that's not in my portfolio,
Sure, okay.
David. I mean, I think...
Is this one of the constraints that you're going to find now, going from backbencher to frontbencher?
And I paused then because...
it's a new discipline.
Up until now, I've obviously had the freedom to opine on, you know, all variety of topics, and now I wouldn't want somebody cutting across my ministerial responsibilities, and I'm very conscious of not doing it, other than to say I think Josh has been a standout minister in this government and will continue to be.
Very disciplined Minister. Thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations once again.
Thanks, David.